I think one of the interesting things where some more work needs to be done is the notion of poverty and how we define poverty, because Indigenous Australian poverty is not the same as Australian poverty. And I think that that's where some of the research needs to be far more strategic in how we define what poverty is. Poverty in terms of Indigenous Australia is extreme poverty, and it's not the same as non-Indigenous poverty in Australia. That's one meal every 48 hours for one child in a household. We know that when we analyse schools, they are the barometer by which we measure the education of the nation, by which we measure where the future of the nation is going. And we know that health is fundamentally linked to education. Yet what we're seeing on a national level is that we don't have a national committee on education, and nor do we have any senior Aboriginal educators on the National Health Board. I think that these are fundamental reforms that need to happen immediately if we are to address, to any shape and form, Aboriginal health in the country. There's been lots of research done on how poor health affects education, but there's been very little done on how education affects poor health outcome. So my writing at the moment is currently looking at research in health literacies. How do illiterate communities read medicines? How do we get illiterate communities not only in children, but the middle order of parents and grandparents to begin to even read a prescription? These are fundamental problems that have plagued the education sector, and colleagues in my discipline are trying to work on this as quickly as possible. So I think the far more marrying of health and education, but more particularly education, schooling, learning outcomes. We need new curricula. We need new definitions of literacy, because the concept of health literacy requires new definitions, new measures of how we measure children with a coherent set of health literacy skills in which that they can operate. I think one of the interesting things that my discipline, particularly education, needs to play is a far more comprehensive way about how to reconcile the number one health truth or faux pas that's occurring in this country, and that is that the health of individuals or the wellness of individuals is based upon how individuals live their lives. So the whole philosophy that we're working on at the moment is if we develop healthy individuals, we somehow develop in healthy communities. And I think that that's problematic. It takes a whole community to raise a child. It takes a whole community to make wellness important to children. So if we take that premise, we know that just in getting one child numeracy and literacy in order to get good health outcomes is problematic. We need to educate a whole community for health. And I think this is where my discipline particularly can contribute immensely to the nation's notion of health. I think we must move beyond the notion that wellness is just an individual responsibility. More Aboriginal teachers, more Aboriginal doctors, more Aboriginal nurses are fundamentally important. But that doesn't mean that just by adding Aboriginal peoples to the system and stirring that we have equality. What we need to do is we need to target Aboriginal teachers particularly, because there's no other profession in our society that directly impacts upon the next generation. For instance, only 0.3 of all teachers in Australia are Indigenous. We have a teacher education crisis, an Aboriginal teacher education crisis. And we need to address this. Aboriginal peoples are turning away in their droves from the teaching profession. Yet, to teach an Aboriginal child health skills, teachers are fundamental, important. I think that what we do need at this stage is a national transition strategy to be able to take Indigenous students to the year 12 and then move them into universities. We do need not only teachers, educators, and medical doctors and nurses, but we also need Aboriginal researchers. The concept of reform in this country is built upon research. and Indigenous researchers are needed. We need masters, we need postgraduate students, qualifications. And so these are fundamental. The Aboriginal health in this country is only going to get better if we start to address from the very outset education. South Australia is the only state in Australia that has a curriculum from birth to year 12. No other state has this. So this is a major intervention that needs to be on a national scale. And we must throw out the poisonous ideology of educating an Aboriginal child out of an Aboriginal education. Indigenous languages are fundamental. Indigenous pedagogies and literacies are important. And I think in a time where there are some of my colleagues inside the education discipline who are advocating that Aboriginal languages and cultures should stay at the door is poisonous to the future of Aboriginal health in this country.